you know, that some people in Southeast Asia think that there is value in trying to approach India so as to balance the power in Southeast Asia against China. What do you think about that?
It's not just people in Southeast Asia that think this. I've heard the same kind of thought expressed in think tanks in Western countries, that India can be, if you put it that way, a counterweight to China. We in India don't see things that way. We see things from the point of view that after many centuries of a decreased relevance to the world, India today has a much greater relevance to the world. For the past 60 years, we've been a flag bearer for democracy and for the have-nots. We continue to hold that position, and today, in addition to that, we are becoming a flag bearer for showing that democracies can also get their economic act together. And for those that think that India needs to be a counterpoint to China, I think that's a very narrow kind of thinking. There will be other counterpoints to China as well. You shouldn't write off the old developed economies of Europe. There is a revival in certain areas going on. You can't write off America's position as the biggest economy and the biggest military superpower of the world. So none of this is going to change in a hurry. But we have to get used to living in a multipolar world. And in this new multipolar world of the 21st century, India and China will both play very important roles.
My last question to you gentlemen will be the same. I expect a different answer from you, of course. Where do you see India going in 10 to 20 years' time? I'll start with you, Mr. Singh.
Well, I want India to be a better country to live in than what it is today, where democracy is even more entrenched than it is today, and where society is even more free to pursue its goals and visions than it is today. And I want India to play a role regionally in the continent and outside, which gives the message of a country that speaks in various languages, that subscribes to various faiths, but is united by a vision and a truly confederation success that only India is. And it is something that the European Union is trying to achieve, and which India has achieved for the last 60 years. And I like India to be the beacon of that story in the rest of the world.
Thank you. Mr. Pilot?
And starting off from what Manvendra said, the official name of this country is actually the Union of India. That's what our constitution says. And we have 22 official languages, 1 billion people of every region, religion, caste, language. And I think it's a great sense of security for us to know that we have lived so long in peace in a democratic setup. Moving forward, like you said, I think how I see things progressing is that we have made progress, we have grown, economies booming, people are talking about India pretty much everywhere. But I think even if it takes us a bit longer, I would want every single Indian in the remotest part of our country, in those thousands of villages that we have who are still untouched by economic development, I think those people need to be empowered both politically, socially, as well as economically. Even if that takes us a decade longer, I'm ready to wait for that, because I think the disparity between the rich and the poor is something that will hurt us in the long run. And I think we must speak for the people whose voices haven't been heard yet. In the next 20 years, if we can achieve that, I'll be the happiest person.
Mr. Panda?
If you look at the last 15 years, India has made huge strides, particularly on the economic front, but also in many social aspects, in terms of getting people that were the underclass of society to become more participatory, more involved in society and participating more. So my vision for the next 10 to 12 years that you've asked for would be simply more of the same. We've gone from a growth rate of around 3 to 4% to a growth rate of today 9%. But as China has shown, even large countries can sustain double-digit growths for a decade and more. Today we have come to knocking distance of double-digit growth. My vision is we should not only touch double-digit growth, but we should sustain double-digit growth for the next 10 to 12 years. And if we do that, and I think it's very doable, then what we can talk about is today we have gone in the last 15 or 20 years from half of all Indians being desperately poor to a quarter of all Indians being desperately poor, meaning less than $1 a day income. On this measure, in the next 10 to 12 years, we should be able to bring that figure down to single digits. That means from today's quarter of Indians being desperately poor, it should come down to 10% or less. And if we focus on that big goal, then I think we can achieve a lot of the other peripheral goals that we are all interested in. When we talk about inclusiveness, for instance, we cannot have inclusiveness without getting the poverty figure much lower. Similarly, when we do get the poverty level much lower, and it is happening, it's an ongoing process, we just have to sustain this process, then we get the size of the middle class become even bigger. We get inclusiveness of people that have not been participants in this success story so far. But that is beginning to change. To give you one example, I come from a state called Orissa, which has traditionally been the poorest in the whole country, or the second poorest, depending on which year you're talking about. But in the last few years, because of the decentralization of our economy, because of changing economic policies and greater freedom, Orissa has emerged as one of the top investment destinations in the country. So you have a huge chunk of almost 40 million people who had been left out of the Indian success story for decades, today suddenly beginning to be part and parcel of that success story. And this means that as we continue to grow, and if we can sustain double-digit growth, this will happen all around the country, not just in the prosperous urban areas. And that is my vision.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been very interesting and very informative. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.